You know, clearly lawyer jokes are, you know, something you deal with as a lawyer, but my judge was very adamant about, you know, that as a lawyer you have a very solemn obligation to the public. So that's, you know, that's what I've sort of tried to use as my.
That's a great point. Other people that are in the limelight, I think you'd worked on the Hill you mentioned before law school, and surely elected officials, the 435 congressmen, the 100 U.S. senators, they're constantly under the spotlight.
Yeah.
What was that like, the thrill of being there? Was it thrilling to be there on the Hill?
It was absolutely thrilling. I mean, to look back now and to see what I saw with my eyes being written into the history books is really what happened, and it's an amazing experience. I mean, I really have always said that really all people of college age, you know, if they could have that experience, they ought to take it, because it's just tremendous. Because you go up there and here you are in a committee room, and for instance, I was in a committee room in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, of which I worked on a couple of different occasions. You know, Janet Reno was coming in to give testimony on at that time the big issue was child abductions, and how do we deal with these abductions, and how do we deal with this, you know, with other countries that people, if they abduct a child here in the U.S., if they're married, for instance, and they take that was usually the case, they were married, a U.S. national and a foreign national get married, and then the foreign national takes their child back to their home country. And so then how do we go back? How do we go and get that child? Because in some instances, those governments were not receptive to our going in and trying to get those children. So to hear that kind of testimony, to see those people there, of course, you know, the Whitewater controversy was also hot in the news. And
during your tenure there.
That's right, and my senator was on that committee, the Whitewater Committee. So
which senator was that?
That was Senator Locke Fairclough from North Carolina.
North Carolina, correct.
At the time, the junior senator from North Carolina, but he, because at that time that was also when you had the change in 1994, when you had the change from a primarily Democratic Congress to a Republican, the contract with America, Newt Gingrich, and all of that. So those were sort of really interesting times to be up there on Capitol Hill. I can only imagine that now is similarly a fascinating time to be up there.
Leading up to big presidential elections, and of course the changeover from the Republican majority to the Democrats.
Changing back to the Democrats,
exactly.
right? That's
Is that the first time since '94 it's changed?
I think the Senate, has gone one way or the other, but not to have them both. And that's always the interesting, because the typical sort of party spin on a lot of these things as well. We only have one house or the other, but when you have two, there really isn't a debate as to whether you can or whose ball the court the court is in. So in this case, it's in the Democratic Congress's control. Of course, it's been in the Republican Congress's control, and we had a Republican president. So, there's a lot of discussion around that whole. But really seeing all of that, seeing how our government works, and it was really just a fascinating experience. You
really covered all bases there, Culley, on the legal side. Having been on the Hill for a long time, obviously having then clerked with a judge, experienced both the legislative branch, the judicial branch. What's left? I guess the executive branch.
Well, I'm here to say that I'm, announcing my candidacy for the President of the United States. I guess that's the only thing that's left.
That's all that's
I think that's a little bit
premature. We're having the presidential debates here, on January 10th.
Right.
The Republican Party will be having theirs here. We're hopeful the Congressional Black Caucus will wrap up. Congressman Clyburn has been here to announce if it's happening, depending on when the date is. It'll be happening here in Myrtle Beach. So we hopefully will have two U.S. presidential debates, at least one January 10th, but hopefully two here.
That would be fantastic.
In Myrtle Beach in January, February time period. Yeah, which could be tremendous.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be a really interesting. Of course, and that's the other thing. I think looking back, having being, because really you can divide the world now into pre-2001 and post-2001, and so I think now is a really pivotal time in our nation's history to determine which direction we're going to go and how we're going to deal with this sort of this faceless enemy that we have to deal with.
Right.
overseas. So it'll be a really interesting. The debate will be really interesting on both sides of the aisle.
We don't think about that often, or at least obviously this is a community affairs show. I don't think we sit back and think often enough about a pre-9/11, a pre-2001 and a post-2001, since we're focused on topics of local or regional interest, as opposed to when you point out Congress and the folks in the executive branch are focused on worldwide and focused on everything that impacts America. That's a very good point.
Yeah, well,
very good point.
There is, and all of that really does affect us in our daily lives. We don't necessarily think about it. Getting on, the plane here at Myrtle Beach Airport,
right.
Things have changed since,
right.
2001, and just really, there's so much that's pervasive throughout our country now in terms of privacy. And data protection, and a lot of the reasons behind a lot of those efforts that we're taking a look at have implications when you talk about security and what you can or can't sell, what kind of technology you can send overseas, or that it's allowed to come into this country. So there are a lot of there are a lot of implications from 2001 that go beyond just sort of the war in Iraq.
That's a very good point. Very good point. So much going on, and obviously in your practice, Culley, we want to talk a little about green building, some recent developments in privacy and IP law, intellectual property law. At the same time, obviously, when we're thinking about green buildings, I saw 6 words this morning: leadership and energy and environmental design, which turned into an acronym, LEED. What's that all about?
LEED is it's basically a set of basic sort of requirements that this organization called the U.S. Green Building Council has come up with, and it's basically a set of criteria for. Really, it started out on the commercial side, commercial construction.
Right.
So if you're going to build a commercial construction, a building, an office building, for instance, this group sets out the criteria for what would be environmentally friendly sort of building.
Right.
And when they say environmentally friendly, they're not just talking about, the materials that go into the construction are clearly important, but also the efficiency of those materials and the systems. Everything from collecting the rainwater and the runoff water from the building and spreading that out, using that as your irrigation system, so that you're not having to then waste county or city water to pump it out. I would imagine that would be a particularly useful thing here in this area. But it's really it started in the commercial construction area, and is slowly catching on. I think the problem to date has been construction using the LEED criteria is, according to industry analysts, about 10% more than the average. The normal price.
10% more expensive.
10% more expensive to get the LEED certification, which is what you want to get, to say you have a LEED certified building. And the benefits there are clearly, perception to your customers. If your customers value you as sort of a environmentally conscious company, then that's going to be a value to your customers. And so to be able to have that LEED certification really puts your money where your mouth is, kind of thing. And then that's really what it's been all about. But to date, most of the LEED certification has been in the area of government contracting, schools, university office buildings and the like. There hasn't been as much, especially in this area, in the way of commercial construction using LEED certification. We do have, I did take a look at, they have online, they have a posting really of all of the LEED certified buildings and projects across the country.
Wow.
And just so we all are talking on the same page, LEED certification is certainly something that's laudable and people ought to be congratulated for. But on the other hand, there's a continuum of LEED certification. So you can be just LEED certified, and then you can be up to, I think it's platinum certified. So there's a number of levels and steps that you can go through in order to reach that. Some of the things that might be useful here might be, you get credit. It's basically you get points. You get points for instance, having bicycle racks outside of your building. You get points for being close to public transportation. You get points for, giving priority to hybrid vehicles. So things like that, they're basically saying that you're looking and thinking in sort of a environmentally conscious way. Those types of steps, concrete steps that you might implement in your project would be steps that would get you toward, would be steps towards LEED certification.
That's fascinating, Culley.
Yeah, they really
Aside from going ahead and increasing, the costs that are going to be incurred by doing a building that way, let's say it's a $100 million project, it would be, you could potentially do the same project and not be LEED certified for $90 million.
Right, that's right. The question is, and this is really where they're at this point where really the change in the law is that they're trying to, government is trying to encourage this kind of building, because obviously to the extent that we can minimize the amount of greenhouse gases that we put up, which according to this U.S. Green Building Council, buildings themselves account for the vast majority of U.S. based greenhouse gases. So to the extent that we can minimize those, we certainly ought to encourage it.
Right.
Is their position, and so it's really one of those long-term benefits. So if you are a building owner and you think you're going to have the property for 10 or 15 years, say, you're probably going to recoup that amount, that extra 10% in the savings that you're going to realize from less less escaping, more efficient building. So and they're also, as I said, they're trying to put onto that tax incentives. The EPA has some. There was a law that was passed back in 2005, I believe, called the EPA Act, and that basically is one that again provides tax incentives for these kind of green building initiatives. So you can get some, as a builder, you can get some tax deductions and incentives for following these type of guidelines.
Culley, I hate to say it, we're going to have to get you back another time.
Absolutely.
I'm embarrassed. I think I've run over. The director's going to cut me off if I
Well, it's been a pleasure, Greg, as always.
Thank you so much for coming in. We really caught up on a lot. We'll talk about some of these other issues next time we get you in. Stay tuned to more of Culley Carson, Womble, Carlyle, Sandridge, and Wright. It's coming up next. We ran out of time. We didn't even have a chance to talk to Culley about his service on the board of directors for the John Avery Boys and Girls Clubs of Durham, North Carolina. Take a look. Go online, WCSR.com, the law firm's award-winning website, WCSR.com. Learn more about Culley Carson, that is, real simple. Take the time. He's making a difference every day.